Imagine a world devoid of defined borders and universal laws, where the fundamental rule is the supremacy of the powerful. It's a world where an ally today could become an adversary tomorrow, where winter temperatures plummet to -40 degrees Celsius, and survival hinges directly on your resilience and your weapon. This was the reality of the Mongolian steppe in the 10th century, before a figure named Temujin brought about a profound transformation. But what was the steppe like prior to Genghis Khan, before the rise of history's largest contiguous empire? Who governed it, and how could such a fragmented and tumultuous land give birth to a force that subjugated both Asia and Europe? The answer to this question will be revealed at the conclusion of this video. Before we proceed, however, please share in the comments where you are watching this video from and what time it is for you. I'm curious to see its global reach.
Now, let's transport ourselves to 1160, a time when the Mongolian steppe remained without a single ruler. In 1160, if you had stood in the heart of the Mongolian plateau and surveyed your surroundings, you wouldn't have encountered a unified state. Instead, you would have witnessed a political chessboard featuring 5 formidable powers, each commanding its own domains. Southeast of the Onon, Kurlan and Tul rivers lay the Kamog Mongol, a tribal confederation of Mongols. These were the ancestors of those we today identify as Mongols. Yet, at that time, they weren't the most dominant force. Throughout the 10th century, more potent tribes, such as the Naimans in the western part of the plateau and the Karaits in its central region, had significantly solidified their power. While the Mongols contended with smaller tribes like the Merkits and Tatars, the territories of the Tatars stretched southeastward around Lake Kulun and Lake Bur. This was a powerful and wealthy alliance that controlled trade routes leading to the Chinese Jin dynasty. The Tatars were allies of the Jin, and the Jin utilized them as a means to exert control over other tribes. This policy wasn't straightforward. Chinese dynasties frequently alternated between employing more distant and closer border tribes to ignite animosity among them. It was precisely this strategy that fostered deep-seated resentment between the Mongols and the Tatars. At the core of the steppe lay the domain of the Karaits, a distinctive Turkic Mongol tribe. What's particularly compelling about the Karaits is their adoption of Nestorian Christianity in the early 10th century. Consider this. Right in the heart of the Asian steppe, thousands of kilometers from Europe, existed a nomadic tribe practicing Christianity. World history at times is far more astonishing than we can conceive. To the west, along the Altai Mountains, resided the Naimans. At that juncture, they represented the most formidable power on the steppe. The Naimans constituted an organized Turkic confederation with its own ruling dynasty, a written language, the Uyghur alphabet, and a potent army. Their name, translated from Mongolian, means 8, signifying the 8 tribes or clans that formed this confederation. Finally, to the north, near Lake Baikal, lived the Merkits, a tribe renowned for its fierce nature. Throughout the 10th century, the Merkits regularly launched raids on neighboring groups across the entire Mongolian plateau. Their objectives included livestock, women, and resources. They inhabited the boundary between the steppe and the forest, resulting in a culture that blended pastoralism with hunting, and even some elements of agriculture. These 5 powers held sway. But what's crucial to grasp is this. There were no defined boundaries, walls, or state borders. Only shifting zones of influence determined by military might, marital alliances, and the reputation of their leaders. To comprehend why the steppe produced the most formidable warriors in history, we must understand the nature of life there. Imagine waking up in a felt yurt, a gur in Mongolian, or yurta in Russian. A yurt is always oriented with its door facing south. Inside, the northern section is considered the place of honor, housing ancestral imagery and sacred items. The western side is the men's domain, where saddles and a leather bag containing airog, fermented mare's milk, are kept. The eastern side belongs to the women, where food is prepared and utensils are stored. Outside, winter temperatures can plunge to -40 degrees Celsius. In such conditions, people don't merely survive. They must work, tend to their herds, hunt, and occasionally fight. The steppe diet reflected this harsh environment. Dairy products formed the staple: butter, yogurt, cream, and kurut, a dried cheese. Cheese was frequently air-dried and cured by leaving it on the yurt roof,
exposed to wind and sun for preservation. Mutton was valued but consumed infrequently, as live animals held greater worth than their meat. Every sheep, every horse, every goat represented property, wealth, and future prosperity. And of course, there was the steppe's signature beverage, fermented mare's milk. This drink has a slightly sour taste, contains approximately 2% alcohol, yet is rich in nutrients and minerals. An intriguing fact: while many Mongols exhibited lactose intolerance, the fermentation process broke down lactose, transforming mare's milk from a laxative into a nourishing drink. This represented a perfect marriage of nature and culture. The division of labor was clearly defined. Men were responsible for herding livestock, hunting, and warfare. Women, on the other hand, managed the household, milked animals, processed milk into cheese and yogurt, cooked meat, and prepared dumplings. One should not, however, mistake Mongol women for being delicate. They too toiled outdoors, enduring the same harsh conditions. In many instances, they possessed proficiency in horsemanship and archery. Each family resided in a single gur, with several blood-related gurs forming a katalet, the fundamental societal unit. Multiple katalets then constituted a nu, providing mutual support in daily chores and military campaigns. Finally, many such nuals coalesced into a tribe. Yet, a crucial nuance exists. The social structure was more intricate than it initially appeared. History often portrays steppe tribes as egalitarian communities where everyone held equal standing. However, reality presented a much more nuanced picture. Steppe society featured distinct stratification. An aristocratic class, known as white bone, comprised hereditary chiefs, while black bone denoted the commoners. Following the family, the next largest social formations were subclans and clans, organized on a patrilineal basis, meaning all members traced their lineage to a common ancestor. This system was structured around three criteria: genealogical distance, generational distance, and birth order. Such an arrangement fostered a complex web of honor, obligations, and power. In such a forbidding environment, warfare was not an anomaly, but an inherent aspect of life. Raids aimed at acquiring livestock, women, and captives were considered a legitimate means of accumulating wealth. While this may seem brutal today, it's essential to view these events within their historical context. The steppe lacked stores, stable markets, or a financial system. Your affluence was measured by your livestock and people. If a severe winter decimated your entire herd, your family faced starvation unless you could acquire animals from others. This is not to justify violence, but to explain the prevailing circumstances. In a world of finite resources and no state to safeguard property rights, military might remained the sole method for preserving what one possessed and obtaining what one needed. Every man capable of riding and wielding a weapon was simultaneously a herdsman and a warrior. They grew up on horseback, learning archery from an early age. Mongol horses, though small, were resilient, able to cover up to 160 kilometers daily, forage for food, and survive in challenging conditions. The fusion of equestrian prowess, the composite bow, and the Mongols themselves created a winning formula for military dominance. However, steppe warfare transcended individual skill. It also hinged on alliances, political maneuverings, and the ability to anticipate enemy actions. This is where matters became more complicated. At the close of the 10th century, the steppe was populated by numerous clans and tribes, each with its own leader and social hierarchy. These alliances were fleeting, and clans frequently shifted their allegiances. Why? Because the steppe lacked the modern concept of nationhood or ethnicity. To whom did one owe loyalty? Primarily to one's family, secondly to the clan, and thirdly to the tribe. But if your tribal chief was weak and another leader was more powerful and generous, why not switch sides? Loyalty was earned through victories, spoils, and reputation. A good chief had to be not only courageous in battle, but also generous toward his followers, astute in politics, and capable of discerning when to fight and when to forge alliances. Consider the interplay among the main powers. The Karyids and Naimans were long-standing rivals, vying for control of the central steppe. The Tatars, allies of the Jin dynasty, leveraged Chinese weaponry and money to maintain their supremacy.
The Mongols, being weaker and more fragmented, had to navigate these forces, at times uniting with one side to counter another. And then there were the Merkits, outsiders known for their combativeness and unwillingness to submit to anyone. Tagrul's story, the Caryid leader, vividly illustrates this complexity. His youth was riddled with calamities. As a child, Merkits captured and enslaved him. Then, at age 13, he and his mother fell into Tatar captivity. Around 1165, upon his return and ascension as Caryid chief, his first action was to eliminate his brothers to remove rivals. One brother, Urkara, fled to the Naimans. Later, Urkara returned with a Naiman army and overthrew Tagrul. Tagrul was forced to flee and sought assistance from his old blood brother, Yasuge, the Mongol leader. Yasuge had previously aided Tagrul in reclaiming his throne, forging a deep and enduring bond of obligation. This instance highlights a crucial aspect. Personal relationships and sworn pacts often transcended tribal allegiances, passing down through generations. Nevertheless, another significant player, not native to the steppe but profoundly influencing it, was the Chinese Jin dynasty. The Jin were not interested in conquering the steppe itself. Its vastness, poverty, and governance challenges made it undesirable. Instead, they employed a sophisticated divide-and-conquer strategy. Chinese dynasties frequently alternated their support between distant and neighboring border tribes to incite conflicts amongst them. This tactic proved highly effective, for instance, igniting fierce animosity between the Mongols and Tatars. The Jin dynasty supplied allied tribes with weaponry, funds, and titles. They purchased loyalty with silk, grain, and iron goods, items scarce in the steppe. Concurrently, they recognized the danger of any single tribe accumulating excessive power. Therefore, they would shift their support to another tribe, maintaining a precarious balance of power. This represented the pinnacle of imperial diplomacy, requiring not large armies, but merely financial resources and an understanding of steppe politics. For an extended period, this approach worked, keeping the steppe fragmented. Tribes continued to clash, and the Jin's northern frontier remained relatively secure. However, such fragmentation came at a cost. During the 1160s, the Kamak Mongol Confederation, a loose collective of Mongol clans, suffered substantial weakening. Two of their khans, Kutula and Ambagai, died in the 1160s, leading to the disintegration of this initial confederation. Their demises were not incidental. According to some accounts, Ambagai was captured by the Tatars and handed over to the Jin, where he was brutally executed. This served as a stark reminder of the steppe's inherent dangers, both internal and external. Following the deaths of these khans, the Mongols found themselves in relative destitution. Other tribes, such as the Naimans and Karaites, grew significantly more powerful, while the Mongols contended only with lesser tribes. Under these circumstances, Yasuge, Kutula Khan's nephew, achieved some victories against the Tatars. He befriended the Karaite Khan Togrul, forging an alliance that could potentially restore the Mongols' standing. Yet, around 1171, Yasuge was poisoned by the Tatars. His death left Hoelun a widow with several young children, including a 9-year-old boy named Temujin. This family was abandoned by their tribe on the steppe. Consider the profound implications. In a wilderness where survival depended on community, abandonment was tantamount to a death sentence. A widow with 6 children, without a large herd, and without men to protect them. Typically, this would have been a fatal prognosis. According to the secret history of the Mongols, a vital source from that era, Hoelun was forced to dig for roots and gather wild fruits to feed her children. The context implies this food was consumed solely out of necessity, not by choice. Nevertheless, they survived, and the young Temujin matured amidst poverty and neglect, forging an indomitable resolve and a deep comprehension of the steppe world's harsh realities. What insights can we glean from this desolate steppe environment? First, fragmentation breeds vulnerability. Individual steppe tribes possessed strength, superior cavalry, skilled archers, resilient warriors. However, when divided, their power sufficed only for self-defense and mutual raiding. They could achieve nothing more substantial.
Second, conditional loyalty is perilous. When everyone pursues only their immediate interests, long-term projects become impossible. Trust is absent, and no organization surpassing a tribe can endure. Third, external powers can exploit disunity. The Jin did this masterfully. They had no need to conquer the steppe directly. Keeping it fragmented was sufficient. A divided adversary is no adversary at all. Yet, herein lies the paradox. It was precisely this harsh and chaotic environment that cultivated the qualities necessary for building a vast empire. Life on the steppe instilled resilience, adaptability, and the ability to find advantage everywhere. It taught that survival demanded both physical prowess and strategic acumen. It taught that loyalty must be earned, not inherited. For a boy raised in poverty and forsaken by his tribe, the lesson was even more profound. The old system, a system of warring tribes, loyalties based on kinship, and unstable alliances, had failed. Something different was required, a new system. By the late 10th century, the Mongolian steppe was a world in anticipation.
The mighty Naiman, Karaite, and Tatar tribes were at their zenith, seemingly invincible, wealthy, and organized. But beneath the surface, signs of change were emerging. A new generation was rising, individuals who had witnessed the brutality of the old ways, losing parents in endless feuds. They began to question whether another path existed. A few young leaders initiated trials with fresh concepts. What if allegiance stemmed from merit rather than lineage? What if gifted individuals from any background could achieve prominence? What if spoils were distributed fairly rather than exclusively benefiting the elite? These ideas were not yet revolutionary, but they were beginning to take root. Elsewhere in the steppe, a young man named Imogim, who was around 30 in 1190, was gradually gathering a small cohort of dedicated followers. He lacked physical might and a large army, but he possessed something else, a vision for what the steppe could become, and the unwavering resolve to realize it. However, that narrative is for another occasion. So, let's return to the initial query. How could a fragmented, disordered land like the Mongolian steppe produce a force that dominated both Asia and Europe? The answer lies in a paradox. It was precisely the chaos that forged extraordinary individuals within the steppe. The relentless environment cultivated an unyielding resilience. The absence of established structures created fertile ground for new concepts to emerge. More importantly, fragmentation led to suffering, and suffering, in turn, fueled a demand for transformation. Many generations of steppe inhabitants endured incessant warfare, feuds passed down through clans, and senseless losses. They witnessed their sons perish due to ancient grievances, their daughters captured during raids, and their livestock stolen. This cycle repeated endlessly. Finally, some declared, enough. Enough of intertribal conflict, enough of shifting loyalties, enough of the weakness born from disunity. They yearned for something novel. They only needed someone to show the way. The Mongolian steppe before Temujin did not experience a golden age. It was a turbulent era, rife with violence and instability. Yet, this very chaos set the stage for a historical metamorphosis. Sometimes, profound disorder gives birth to the greatest order. Sometimes, total collapse is necessary before something new can be constructed. The 10th century Mongolian steppe teaches us this. Without crisis, there is no change. Without pain, there is no growth. And occasionally, the individual remembered is not the one who initiated the chaos, but the one brave and skilled enough to bring it to an end. Perhaps you might wonder what relevance this holds for us today. Look around you. Any organization, endeavor, community, even a family, when fragmented, when everyone pursues only personal interests, when there is no shared vision, becomes fragile. Your individual talent is immaterial. If you cannot collaborate, if you cannot build trust, if you cannot create something greater than yourselves, your potential will be constrained. Individual Mongols before Temujin were exceptional warriors, but their strength was sufficient only for self-preservation. Only by uniting were they able to forge something that transformed the world. The second lesson, a harsh environment is not a curse. It can be a crucible.
The challenges you face today, whatever they may be, mold you. The question is not whether you will encounter difficulties, but who you will become afterward. Temujin grew up in destitution, abandoned, forced to forage for roots to survive.
Most people in such a situation would perish or become ordinary, but he used this pain as motivation, as a lesson, as a forge for his spirit. You can do the same with your trials. And the final lesson: sometimes an old system must collapse before a new one can emerge. If everything around you is ineffective, at work, in relationships, in your life, do not be afraid to question it. Do not accept the answer, that's how it's always been. The people who change the world are those who dare to envision something different. If this video offered you a fresh perspective on history or prompted self-reflection, please let me know by first liking it. This helps the algorithm deliver profound historical narratives to a wider audience.
Second, subscribe to the channel to not miss upcoming stories, because this is just the beginning of the Mongolian journey. The tale of how Temujin, from an abandoned boy, became Genghis Khan, the unifier of the steppe, deserves a separate telling, and I will recount it in the next video. Third, leave comments and share your thoughts. What lesson from the 10th century Mongolian steppe do you find applicable to modern life? Have you ever found yourself in a situation akin to the untamed steppe, where everything was chaotic and you had to find your own path? What did you do? Share your story. The community here doesn't just watch videos, we learn from each other. And if you wish to delve deeper, I've included links to historical sources in the description. The Secret History of the Mongols is particularly worth reading. It's a foundational 11th century text offering direct insights into that world. History is not inanimate.
It offers living lessons for how we live today. The 10th century Mongolian steppe provides timeless lessons on the significance of solidarity, the resilience forged through adversity, and humanity's ability to transcend its limitations. These teachings remain pertinent in our current era. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we will delve into the compelling narrative of Temujin's rise to power. Until then, remember that even amidst external chaos, you possess the potential to establish order.